I start by making the icing. I pour 60 ml of cold water into a heavy base saucepan. Then I add 75 grams of coconut butter, which is different from coconut oil, though you could use margarine. "50 grams of soft brown sugar gives a subtle suggestion of caramel that I adore. To get the slightly bitter edge I want, I add 1½ tablespoons of cocoa, plus 1.5 teaspoons of instant espresso powder. I bring all the ingredients to the boil and then turn off the heat before quickly adding some finely chopped chocolate. It must be good and dark. Nothing less than 70% cocoa solids will do. I give the pan a swirl to help the chocolate melt gently into the hot liquid. And then I whisk it all together until it's thick and smooth. Then leave it to cool while I get on with the gorgeous cake. That's 225 grams of plain flour, 1½ teaspoons of bicarb, ½ teaspoon of free-flowing salt, and just as in the icing, 1.5 teaspoons of instant espresso powder. And a lot of cocoa, 75 grams. This is a very chocolatey chocolate cake. It's a two-stage affair, and the first stage is done. For the second stage, a lot of water, 375 ml. Now, this is the liquid batter, and that's what makes the texture so fabulous. I've got 75 grams of coconut oil. It would be 90 ml if it were liquid. And the thing about coconut oil is it's solid until the temperature is 24 centigrade, and then it liquefies. Just give this a little coax to help it melt. You can use any vegetable oil, but I find coconut oil really gives a wonderful crumb. And just as there was dark sugar in the icing, there is soft dark sugar here. 300 grams of it. I want 1.5 teaspoons of vinegar. The vinegar acts with the bicarb to make the cake rise and have a lightness, and this is very important since, of course, there are no eggs. And now it's just a matter of pouring the one into t'other. Quite apart from being seduced by the splendid squidginess of this cake, it's so easy. You can see why I wheel it out for every family birthday now. This cake needs about 35 minutes in a 180-degree oven, and then you just let it cool in its tin. Once it's cold, the icing will be at perfect consistency. I pour that on and then celebrate the cake's sumptuousness by sprinkling it with rose petals and pistachios. And now, a casual stroll to the oven. To finish the cake, I gently ease the icing to the edges. If you want to adorn it, now is the time. Strew joyously with chopped pistachios and dried rose petals, or whatever your heart desires. It needs to be left for 30 minutes to set, but that's a big ask. I've always been something of a pavaholic, and my latest creation is a lemon one. A combination of marshmallow sweetness, smooth, cool cream and tangy citrus is just rhapsodic. I make the pavlova's billowy base in advance. To do this, I start by whisking egg whites. What I'm waiting for is the stage at which they form satiny peaks. Then I patiently beat in my caster sugar, 1 spoon at a time. Patience is not one of my outstanding qualities, but it's necessary here. I derive great satisfaction from watching the meringue slowly become glossier. Once the mixture is stiff and shiny, I turn meringue into pavlova base to be with the addition of 2 ingredients. First, corn flour. Usually this is combined with vinegar in a pav, but this being a lemon pavlova, I'm using lemon juice, as well as the finely grated zest, which is where all the flavour resides. Then it's a case of just folding everything gently together. Now, a little culinary crafting. I dab the 4 corners of a sheet of greaseproof paper with the mixture I have left on the whisk, which will act as a glue to stop the sheet slipping on the baking tray. I adore how the snowy marshmallow spills onto the sheet in all its alpine glory. I'm aiming for a regular circular shape, or as regular as I can get it, which means a lot of flattening and smoothing, but I find this rather restful. It'll take about an hour to cook, and then it can be left to cool in the switched-off oven. I'll wait till just before my friends arrive tomorrow before piling it up into a pavlova proper. The pavlova base is cooled, and it's been cooled for a while and resting. Cracks will appear, don't worry. This happens, and besides, as ever, I flip it over. I always do this because I love the way the tender part of the pavlova base, like a marshmallow, hits the smoothness of the cream. But actually, I am departing from tradition here because what goes on next is not cream, but lemon curd. I'm happy to use lemon curd from a jar, providing it's good and zingy, and if not, you can always add some lemon zest and lemon juice. Don't be alarmed if some of it drips down the side of the meringue base. I rather love that. Push it to the sides. It will drip more as it stands. And I shall drape the curd with the cream, whipped, but not too whipped. Coax it to the edges. I've got a lot of almonds I've toasted, by which I mean I've toss them out in a dry, hot frying pan until they're this color. You need a lot. This isn't just decoration. It's so that you get a good amount of crunch. I always think of this a bit like an upside-down lemon meringue pie. And finally, some lemon zest. And I just can't wait to sink into this lemony lusciousness. For the base, I like to use chocolate sandwich biscuits, which I break up roughly before dropping them into a food processor. Next, I add some good dark chocolate. I give this a blitz until I have beautiful earthy rubble. On top of this, I add some soft unsalted butter and smoked sea salt flakes, though you can of course use regular sea salt flakes. This gets another blitz until the butter is incorporated. I tip this mixture into a loose-bottomed flan tin, then press it down and around the edges with my hands before smoothing it with the back of a spoon. I leave the lined case in the fridge to set overnight so that all I need to do the next day is melt a few luscious ingredients together for the filling. I begin by finely chopping a slab of chocolate. Again, it must be good and dark. So I have already laid the foundations for my salted chocolate tart, in other words, made the base. And now for the filling. I'm going to start off by using a word that I love, which is I'm going to slake some corn flour in milk. This gives a satiny lusciousness to the chocolate filling. Right, that's done. Feeling very efficient in a warm kind of a way. And now, we need some cream, a lake of cream. I've used very good dark chocolate, so I need a bit of sugar. And then the cozy sweetness of vanilla. You can use extract, but I love this goo. So that's the light side. Now come with me, if you will, to the dark side, and I mean dark. Some instant espresso. I use this a lot with chocolate because it provides a really deep, dark hinterland. In life, I have no truck with bitterness. In the kitchen, I'm drawn to it. So I want some cocoa. And although sieving is my least favourite job in the kitchen, I am prepared to do this now because it's worth it. I promised a salted chocolate tart, but I'm going one better, smoked salt. I am a person of passions and I love this stuff. It brings a slight note of the bonfire. Now the chocolate goes into the pan here. And then finally, an ooze of extra virgin olive oil. It would be more usual to use butter here, but the thing is, to me, butter just merges in with the cream. It doesn't add anything, and this brings a sort of slightly grassy, peppery savouriness, as well as gleam. And on we go. At this stage, I just want the chocolate to start melting. Then I can add my slaked corn flour. Right, so the chocolate's melted now. In this goes. The corn flour helps this mixture to thicken, and without eggs, which makes life very simple. I mean, you saw how easy the tart base was to make. This is even easier. I mean, it's embarrassingly easy. Now, it's quite easy to tell when it's ready. I mean, you can see how thick it is, but this is scientific method. Lift up the spoon, draw your finger across the back, and you can see that it's not trickling. That line is staying there. That means turn off the heat and pour into a jug to cool. Now, it's got to be cool enough so that it doesn't melt the biscuit base, but I still want it to have a bit of flow to it, so when I pour it into the base, it will just ripple in. To prevent its getting a skin, I'm going to scrunch up some dampened parchment, which I have about my person, as one does. Just put it on the top. My mother taught me this. So once this has cooled down a bit, I can build on my foundations. And that's perfect. It to wave its way into the tin. Just a little shimmy to make it flat and even. And now it needs to go in the fridge to set for later. A deep, deep joy awaits. Betty, I've made your favourite.
Oh my gosh.
That looks beautiful. Got your slice.
No, you can't get it.
There we go.
That looks so good.
Oh, that's so delicious.
My apricot and almond cake is no flamboyant creation with fancy decoration, but that's precisely why I'm drawn to it. As it cooks, it wafts the fragrance of rosewater and cardamom and fills the place with serenity-inducing scent. Instead of soaking the apricots overnight in a bowl full of cold water, I simmer them briefly in a scant amount of liquid and 2 cardamom husks, and then I let them get cold, which doesn't take long. But this is more than a shortcut. What it does is it plumps up the apricots and infuses them with cardamom at the same time. These are for the top of the cake. It's about as near to crafts as I get. And you can probably see why. The rest of the apricots, the seeds from the cardamom pods, and this scant amount of syrup go into the processor. Every last bit. This is an apricot and almond cake, and I use ground almonds, 200 grams of them, instead of flour, thus making this gluten-free and dairy-free inadvertently. To add a bit of bite and glorious goldenness, 50 grams of fine polenta, not instant, and some sugar, 150 grams. Not too much sugar because there's a sweetness from the polenta and the ground almonds. I've got a teaspoon of baking powder, 6 eggs, these help the cake to rise and lend moisture. And now we blitz. The magic touch. The thing about lemon is that it really brings out other flavours. 2 teaspoons. And a final fragrant addition, some rose water. The thing about rose water is a small amount and it's full of exotic promise, and too much and it's your great aunt's bubble bath. So 1 teaspoon only. And then we blitz again. This is a 20cm spring form, and I've lined it and greased the sides, and I let the batter just flow in. A few quick bursts of unchallenging activity, and the batter is made, and the oven takes care of the rest. Now time for my modest artistic endeavour. I'm encircling the cake with apricots. This needs about 40 minutes in a 180-degree oven. Once the oven's worked its magic, and while the cake is still warm, I glaze it with some apricot jam that's been made more spreadable by a spritz of lemon juice. Then to finish, a scattering of finely chopped pistachios. And the gleaming goldenness of the cake and the tender green of the pistachios make this a thing of simple beauty. I'm using frozen Filo, which I've thawed. The first step is to line the tin with a sheet or 2 of Filo. Then I pour in a spoonful of melted butter. And now you'll see why it's called Old Rag Pie. Tear and scrunch up a sheet of pastry and drop it in the tin, and repeat until you have a loose layer of Filo rags. In some ways, I think of this as a kind of Greek cheesecake. Crumble some feta over the top of the Filo rags. A scattering of grated Parmesan. And then I sprinkle over some fresh thyme leaves and pour over some more melted butter to finish the layer off. And then I do the same again. So, Filo, feta, Parmesan, thyme and butter. Old Rag Pie was invented by Greek bakeries as a way of using up old scraps of Filo, which means you don't have to be anxious about the fine pastry drying out as you go. For the third and final layer, I use larger Filo rags, filling the tin a little more tightly before folding over the edges and giving a final drizzle of butter. Now, using the sharp point of a knife, make 2 cuts down and 2 across. Pour over some eggs and milk beaten together. Finally, I scatter over a few more thyme leaves and some sesame seeds. Leave it to sit for a good 30 minutes before going into the hot oven for another 30 minutes. That hour leaves you free. Once it's ready, it'll be golden and puffed up. And all it requires is an amber ooze of honey on top. My children like a chocolate chip cookie so gooey on the inside that it's hard to make the outside set enough for the cookies to keep integrity of form. So this is my solution. A chocolate chip cookie dough you bake in a little dish and eat warm with a spoon, the chocolate chips still molten. These are incredibly easy to make. You need soft unsalted butter to start off with, which you beat together with soft light brown sugar. This brings a bit of goo to the texture, along with caramelly sweetness. I'm using a mixer, but a bowl and a wooden spoon would be just fine. Once the mixture is soft and combined, add vanilla paste or extract, and then beat in an egg. I've got some plain flour ready in a bowl, and before I go any further with this, I need to add a little salt and bicarb. Then beat this into the butter and sugar mixture just gently until it coheres. When my children were small, they'd have eaten most of this batter by now. Finally, fold in some chocolate chips. I like very dark, teeny chocolate chips for this. And the pots I cook these in are small too. I hate the word ramekin, but it's ramekins I need for these, so there it is. I'm making 6 even though I'm feeding 4. As I've said before, I am never knowingly undercatered. One final touch, I smooth the tops with a crank spatula. They'll need around 15 minutes in the oven. However much everyone's eaten, there's somehow always room for my cookie dough pots, which I like with a sour tang of creme fraiche. Okay, so I dig in like this, and then
and then I fill the middle. But do you want to try that? Use on the side.
taking tea in muffin form seems to me just about ideal for breakfast. And the tea I choose is chai. Now, I do know that chai just means tea, but the thing about this is that it brings such scented richness without heft. And I think the best vehicle for conveying this wonderful scent is the light fragrance of almond milk. Need about 225 mils, just under a cup. And I infuse the milk with chai simply, if inelegantly, by tearing a couple of tea bags. Just letting the tea spill out. And on top of what is now almost a chai latte, a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. There is cinnamon in chai. It's a mixture of spices, normally cardamom, ginger, maybe a teeny bit of black pepper, but I'm adding a bit more cinnamon. Stir it together, although at this stage, the cinnamon will stay this rather Aztec brown powder on top. Doesn't worry me, don't let it worry you. Heat on, just till it's almost bubbling, don't let it boil, so that the spices really infuse the milk. And along with the almond milk, some almonds, 75 grams. I'm chopping them so that some are quite rough and others are splintery shards and there's a teeny bit of dust. Of course they have a flavour, but so important they have texture. Right, so that's the nuts chopped. Off with this. Let's pour it to get cool. Can you see that wonderful colour? And I can get on with the dry ingredients. Now we get to the spelt flour. Spelt used to be known as dinkel wheat, which I rather like. And in fact, in Germany, where spelt is very popular, it is still called dinkel. About 400 grams. And 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And 150 grams of soft, light brown sugar. Oh, wonderfully and sandy. I use unsweetened almond milk, so that's why I have the sugar, and you need it. Just going to mix this up a teeny bit, the dry ingredients. And then I can get on with the wet. My chai infused milk is cool enough, so on top of that, I want 150 millilitres of oil. It's about 2 of these. Any vegetable oil is fine here. And finally, 2 eggs. I want to whisk these together, but I'm going to have to go slowly and patiently so that I don't splash everything, although it doesn't come naturally to me. And that's enough. So, I spoke too soon about the dry ingredients. I did forget to put in my almonds. I don't want all of them now. I can leave a few back to sprinkle on just before they go in the oven. Here we are. And in goes this rather gorgeously tinted liquid. And the wonderful thing about making muffins is that it doesn't matter how badly you stir, because a lumpy batter makes the lightest muffins. Right, my spice-speckled mixture is ready. Just going to fill a muffin tin. I like to use an ice cream scoop to fill. Makes me feel very decisive as I release the batter. But this is quite a calming way to start the day. It's quite interesting that despite being infused with tea, they do look rather coffee-coloured. Now, sprinklingtons, I have reserved these almonds. So 20-25 minutes in a 200-degree oven, and then we are ready to go into battle for the day. In or out of the kitchen, balance is all important. But for me, a life cannot be a balanced one if there's no room in it for chocolate cake. And I have a radical new one in mind. My brand new creation is a chocolate licorice layer cake. Sandwiched with jam, draped with chocolate, and topped with black currants. And I'm ecstatic about it. I've restocked my licorice box. Now, I know the world divides into licorice loathers and licorice lovers, but I'm on a crusade, and I have made a few conversions. The combination of chocolate and licorice is a revelation. These chocolate licorice almonds are, I describe as entry level. But this licorice-filled chocolate bar is decidedly for the mature student. Moving to warp factor 9, this salty licorice syrup is the antichrist for licorice loathers. But for me, this drizzled over ice cream is a sensation. This is where my love affair with licorice started. I used to spend all my pocket money on these blackcurrant and licorice sweets. What I savoured and still do is that balance between bright, sharp blackcurrant and warm, deep licorice. This is yin and yang in confectionery form, and I knew I had to emulate this in a cake. To do so, I brought chocolate into the partnership, and I use fine licorice powder. This is much more like a spice, bringing a subtle bloom after the bite, and it's my secret weapon for luring licorice loathers over to my side. This cake isn't just divine to eat, it's also really easy to make. Just a case of mixing wet ingredients into dry. I'll start with a dry, plain flour, and enough sugar to balance the immense amount of bitter cocoa that comes after. On top of that, baking powder and bicarb, without which the cake will not rise enough. And last to go into the dry ingredients is fine licorice powder, enough to give a pronounced hit, but trust me, the effect is oh so subtle. Then the wet ingredients, just 3. First, milk. You can use semi-skimmed, but I use almond milk, not least because then it's a dairy-free cake for those who want it so. Next, some sunflower oil. And then eggs. And once combined, they can be added to the dry ingredients. This is when the magic happens. The pale speckled flour is transformed into a glistening rich mahogany paste. And this becomes a glossy batter thanks to the addition of some water from a recently boiled kettle. I whisk this in swiftly, then pour the smooth, chocolatey batter into 2 lined and greased sandwich tins. And don't even think of using loose bottom ones or the batter will escape. These need about 25 minutes in a moderate oven, then let them cool. My cakes have been waiting so patiently to be iced, and I'm happy to oblige. In fact, I'm quite excited. Now, the icing should be a subtle echo of the flavours in the cake, so I'm starting with a whisper of licorice. Just to dissolve that, a bit of hot water. Oh, and now I have some information to impart. I'm going to show you my magic trick. I take this, I put a bit of oil in it. Let's brush it. And because I'm using golden syrup, it won't stick. This is good for honey, treacle, anything like this. And now I will perform said magic trick. All comes out. I'm going to give it a quick stir. And while this comes to a bubble, I'm going to top my chocolate, the last and very important ingredient in the icing. This chocolate is good and dark, a bitter hit against the ambrosial sweetness of the golden syrup. I like bashing this into smithereens. Getting a bit obsessive now. I'm marshalling my chocolate rubble. My bronze liquid is bubbling. So, heat off. This is crucial. The rubble tumbles in. And I just need to swirl the pan. It's not very demanding work. So that the chocolate is submerged and I can get on with filling the cake. The cakes will look quite flat at this stage. They're meant to. Now, one cake down here. I talked earlier about the inspiration for this cake and the sweets of my childhood. So it's only right that the filling for this cake should be blackcurrant jam. Oh, I love its malevolent glint. And the sharpness of the jam is just what you need to punctuate that rather sort of husky licorice quality. And now, lid on. And it's ready to receive a swathe of glossy chocolate. Whisk it on. Needs a bit of coaxing. Try. I'm not a neat freak, and I love it when the chocolate drips down the edges. Black currants can be quite hard to find, although you can sometimes get them frozen. However, I have been known to scrummage about a frozen packet of mixed berries just to get the black currants for this. It's not the most exciting work, but it's worth it.